Hello and welcome to this presentation. My name is David Swizaczeski and I am the 3D specialist for media and entertainment at Autodesk. What I want to go through is some of the new features in the ECS launch. So specifically what I'll be talking about today is some new features in 3D Studio Max, some new features in Maya and also in Mudbox. What you'll be seeing today, we'll be looking at the Populate tool in 3D Studio Max. So this is a great tool doing crowd simulations. That's basically an out-of-the-box solution for that. We'll also be looking at Maya, and inside that, what we'll be looking at is DirectX 11. We'll also be looking at the DirectX 11 shaders. We'll be looking at the new modeling toolset. We'll be looking at Grease Pencil, some new rigging and skinning tools, and how to send an animation to smoke. So what we're actually looking at is how to actually send 3D geometry to smoke. Then Rob's going to take that and work with that tree. So we're not looking at doing traditional renders here where you render out passes and send those render passes to smoke. We're actually talking about sending geometry to smoke and then Rob in smoke being able to edit that geometry and move that around and do whatever he wants, light it and all that sort of stuff. Also be just touching on a little bit Recap, which is a cloud-based solution to do modeling, and we'll also be looking at Mudbox. Inside that we'll be looking at how to retopologize models and how to get that and send that retopologizing into Maya. So really the Recap and Mudbox are kind of tied together. Basic runtime for this is 20 minutes, so let's get started. Here we have a scene, like a street scene here, and what I want to do is I actually want to populate the streets and some of the buildings and all that with crowd. So traditionally, this is quite a laborious process, but luckily now we've got this populate tool here, which allows us to create crowds quite simply. So I'm going to just drop that down and select the populate. One of the first things I want to do, I want to create like a crowd, crowd sort of walking through this area here. So just going to move that over there like that, and then I'm going to go up to here, go create flow, and then just bring this in like so. And you can see as I click, I can change the direction, and then all I need to do now, so basically I'm going to have my crowd walking along here. Now all I need to do is hit simulate, and I'm going to run the simulation for 300 frames because my timeline is 300. Just hit simulate here, and it takes a few seconds, and then there's my scene with the crowd in there. Change my view to camera view, which is down on that level. And we can add more people to this or remove people from this. It's we can really muck around with this if we want to. So that's basically creating a simple flow for people walking along, footpaths or whatever. Let's just go to the perspective view. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a crowd on this rooftop here. So I can do that quite easily just by clicking this create idle areas, and then I'm just going to draw this out, just like drawing out a marquee. Like so. And then again, just hit simulate. And we'll just scrub back to 0. And you can see I've just got an idle crowd simulating there. So some of the things you can do here is you can increase the male to female ratio. You can also increase the density of the crowds in here. But as you saw, this is literally just out of the box, pressing a few buttons, and I've got a crowd simulation happening here. Great little tool here for solving any crowd issues. If you've got to build crowds and you don't have much time. So I'm just gonna muck around with this here, just show you. So I'm just going to increase the density, run the simulation again. You can see that's all I need to do. So it's even a denser crowd now. And I can have more singles, more groups of 3, groups of 2. So let's move on to Recap and Mudbox. Okay, so I've got this model here that was actually created from a whole heap of photos that was taken of a bronze statue in, I think, Vietnam. And the way this was captured was actually through a process called recap, which basically means what I'm able to do is take a whole series of photos, basically overlapping photos, where I just go and take a series all around here that are overlapping, and then I send that to the cloud to actually get processed. And then what gets sent back to me is geometry data as well as the texture and lighting data. So you can actually see this texture that's coming through here. This is what was on the statue. You can see all this lovely detail that's on here. What I want to do now is I just want to talk a little bit about retopologizing and some of the mesh editing tools that are new in Mudbox. We've got quite a dense mesh. If I just turn that back on, you can see how dense this mesh is. It's very dense, and what we get back is a triangulated mesh from recap. What we want to do, if we want to put this into a scene and make it Maya friendly for games or film, we actually want to turn these tris into polygons. So one of the first things we're going to do is I want to edit a few areas where the recap photos didn't quite work. So you can see here I've got some holes in this area here, and you can see the thumb here is kind of connecting, you know, that we don't actually want that. One of the great new features is mesh error. I can turn on display mesh errors. It'll actually show me all the areas on the mesh that are coming in red that are errors, basically. So these are areas where I've got either missing mesh or overlapping or something that's not making it a good mesh. An area I want to work on right now is actually I might just go up here and I'll just fix this error here. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is just go to our selection tool, go to faces, and then I'm just going to bring the brush down a little bit, bring down the magnitude as well. And let's just select that error there and let's delete that. I've created this hole basically in this area here. Now what I want to do is patch that up. So I'm just going to select all the borders around that hole. So all those borders are now selected, and then I'm just going to go up to mesh, patch, and that's created new geometry in that area. All I need to do now to finish this off is go UVs, create missing UVs. So I'm basically just going to create UVs for this new area that I've just made. You can see that's created polygons there with UVs. So if I just go to paint tool here, go across to clone, and then I'm just going to select this area here and then just start painting over it. And you can see I've created a whole new area, and you'd be hard pressed to work out where that patch is. So we can go through and I can fix up all of that errors here in a few areas where it's not telling me there are errors, but we can see there are errors like these holes here. But the next thing I want to do is I actually want to reduce the mesh a little bit, make it a little bit easier to work with. So before I did that patch on that error, I probably should have just reduced the mesh a little bit just to make it easier for myself. So what I'm going to do is select the object here. So I'll just go to object, I'll select the whole thing, go to mesh, I'm just going to go down to reduce mesh. I'm going to make it about 50% and create reduced mesh. And you can see here that I've reduced the poly count down by quite a bit, or the tri count down by quite a bit here. So the next step would be to get this ready for Maya, would be to retopologize this. I've already got one here, and let me just bring this up. So this here is the final retopologized mesh, and you can see that we've got everything in polygons and it's quite simple, and it's been reduced a huge amount. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open up Maya. Okay, so what we've got here is retopologized mesh exported out from Mudbox into Maya, and you can see that we've used the high detailed version of the mesh in Mudbox as a normal map, and that's given us all this detail. But then we've got a relatively low poly mesh underneath that's very, you know, this is reduced hugely from what it was from the recap model. So this is now ready basically to go into a game if we want to put it in a game, or into, you know, background for a scene or something like that. And you can see we've got all this lovely detail around the nose, the face, you know, the chest, all of that's there, and that's sitting there because it's the normal map taken from the extra detail. So that's what our model there looks like. Open this up one more time just to show you. That's with all the detail in there, and you can see we're getting all of that sent through as normal maps. Just before we move over to Maya, I just want to talk a little bit about the retopologizing tools here and show you some of the strengths of them. I've got this cube here. Now, one of the criticisms that has been laid at Mudbox over the years is that you can't create geometry from nothing. Well, now with the retopologizing tool, we can actually create geometry from nothing. So I've got this cube, and let's just say I want to start sculpting it into something. Now I'm just going to start pulling this out, putting this into some sort of weird shape that I want. And you can see as I'm doing this, you can see how stretched the polys are. So basically I'm just pulling these polygons out and it's just stretching them. And I'm getting to a point where I'm getting this real crinkling going on here. So at this point, what I do is I go to Mesh and I'll go Retopologize and go retopologize. Now this is going to retopologize my mesh and fix up all these stretched polygons here. And then you see fixed all of those polys up and given me all these new polys, so I can actually go in and I can just start pulling at this and bringing this down here like so, like that. Pulling these around like so. So all I wanted to demonstrate here is the power of the retopologizing tools, because basically it now allows me to create something from nothing. So I can just really go in here and go absolutely nuts. Just have a lot of fun with it. This is something you just were not able to do previously, because eventually you would get this stretching like you see here, and I can just keep going into this and keep retopologizing this. And there you go. You can see that it's retopologized that, and again I can just go in that and I can just start pulling at that if I wanted to, moving that around and mucking around with that as much as I wanted to. Alright, so we've got our little character here in our world, and the first thing I want to draw to your attention is the Viewport 2.0 and DirectX 11 active shaders happening in the Viewport. First, I just want to talk about Viewport 2.0 and some of the new features. I know this is something that we've had since the last version, but I think they're quite fantastic, and I just wanted to draw your attention to them just for a second. So what we've got in this scene is we've got our little monster dude. You can see we've got this environment that he's in. In the Viewport, currently what we've got is ambient occlusion on, we've got anti-aliasing on, and we've got depth of field on. You can see by turning all those off, we get a much harsher looking image. You can see the anti-aliasing around the edges here. So if I just turn that back on, it'll smooth that out instantly, just make it a nicer image to look at. If I turn on the ambient occlusion, you'll notice it just brings in those shadows quite nicely. And finally, if I turn on the depth of field, notice it just blurs out the background quite nicely. So our foreground images are in focus and our background images are out of focus. What we're running now is DirectX 11 in this Viewport, and that allows us to actually use these DirectX 11 shaders, and in particular the Uber shader. I've brought up the Uber shader, the DirectX 11 shader here. What we've got, there's so many things in the shader that are fantastic. So the first thing is we've actually got light binding, so all the lights in the scene are actually bound to the shader. So we've got them happening and affecting the shader. Now this is the DirectX shader, and behind here are just standard blend shaders. So they're working in the same viewport, and we're having no issues. So that's kind of the first thing to be aware of. The next thing is I'm just going to scroll down into the shader here, and I just wanted to show you that we've got our diffuse colors in here. Like basically this shader's got everything all in one. So we've got our colors in here, we've got our image-based lighting happening in here, our specular happening in here, we've got our normals happening in here, displacement happening in here with our vector displacement map, which is a fantastic mapping system, and we've even got translucency happening in here. Just going to quickly draw your attention to the translucency here, and if we have a look at the ears and around like these boils that are on his back, you can see that we're actually getting that light translucency. So that's the light coming through the skin, and we can actually kind of see through it. So I'll just select this, and then in the translucency I'll just show you what's driving it. It's basic, very simple. This black and white image, this grayscaled image, is what's driving the translucency of the character, and then we can actually dial that in and out. We can muck around with that. So you can see as I muck around with that, it's actually changing that translucency, and I can just get it to a point at where I'm happy with it, which was pretty much where it was. Well, let's just say there. So that's DirectX 11 and the Uber shader. So for those that aren't familiar with the vector displacement map, this here is the vector displacement map, or a good example of the vector displacement map. So displacement maps give you like an in and out. Vector displacement maps allow you to have overlaps or like skin folds, so you don't just get the up and down displacement. So you can see I can dial that in and out. You can see as I give that more, you can see the overhang of his stomach, and that's purely driven by the vector displacement map. Okay, so the next thing I want to have a look at, some new skinning tools. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to I'm going to create some bones in his arms and in his hands here. So I'm just going to select this here, which is snap to projected center of the volume of the mesh that I'm going to be working with. Click on that, and then I'm just going to click on my bone creation tool. With this tool here, I can basically work in this perspective viewport like this and actually just start dropping in the bones. So if I move around, you'll notice that the bones have now been dropped in the center volume of that mesh. And because I had mirror already turned on, it's already done it for the other arm as well. So this is a huge time saver. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this and this bone here and parent that, and then very quickly parent that. So I've quickly got his skeleton there. Now I'm just going to select these bones here and then select his skin and go up to skin, smooth binding, and with heat map selected, I'm just going to apply his skinning to him. So he's skinned, and we'll just grab the arm bone here, and you'll notice. So heat map skinning is a fantastic skinning option. It basically gets you, I would say, about 90% where you need to be for your skinning. So you can see I'm getting it's needs a little bit of work. Skinning always does need a little bit of work, but you can see that these joint areas, which are traditionally very problematic, I'm getting quite a good deformation that's happening in those joints. Okay, so we've got this character who's animating along here. I've got him sort of just walking along, and he actually sits down. So I'll just play this through. He walks along and sits down on the thing, on this little muffler thing here. So the next tool I want to show you is Grease Pencil. So Grease Pencil is a great tool for directors wanting to give feedback on scenes. It's a great learning tool. There's a lot of uses for it. The particular use I'm going to talk about today is how directors can use it in helping to stage scenes and give feedback. So let's just say I've got this character walking here, and we can see on frame 25 his contact point for this foot here is here, and I don't want it there. I can actually give direct feedback and say frame 25 foot needs to be here. So I just go foot here. So move that foot from there and put it there. And I can just go through, and let's just say at this point here, I don't like the silhouette I've got here. I want to open him up a little bit more. So I just draw another frame there, and let's just change the color so we've got something different. And then at this point I might say, no, I want the arm, so he's actually more down like this. So arm there, and then let's go through, and then I'll draw another frame here, and then I want the arm to be more out. You can see I can actually still see the ghosting of the last image that I drew, so I can just easily turn that off so it doesn't get as confusing. Put foot on 25 there. This frame here, 34, I want to make sure the arm's out here. and so forth. So I can go through and just quickly draw this up quite easily and give a whole heap of notes telling my animators where exactly I want him to be. So let's just say at this point I want his shoulders to be about this height, his head to be more up like this, and his eyes to be here. So I can write all this down. I can even color code it. So let's just say eyes are green. So, and then I say over here eye line, which means I want his eyes up here, his head more like that, shoulders down like that. It gives a director a lot more freedom to give direction to the animators on the scene as they're working, instead of writing a whole bunch of notes, which can be quite painful. The next thing I want to talk about, the modeling toolset. So this is the next toolset that was bought last year, the year before, has been incorporated into a standard menu system now in Maya. If I just click on this, this isn't the modeling toolset. I just turn it on, and let's just go to vertex mode. If I zoom in a little bit, one of the great things here, you can see I don't need to be exact on where the vertexes are. I can just sort of move around the vertexes here and it'll snap to them. This is a great tool for if you're doing, very quickly have to grab these verts and then move them wherever you need to move them. We've also got these constraints which allow me to, it's not going to let me do that because he's actually it's got these great constraints that allow me to move along these different axes here. So I want to show you the quad draw tool. So this is another retopologizing tool, which is fantastic. So by checking the quad draw, let's just say I want to make a really low poly model here, but I want to make sure that I follow the contours of this guy. I can just start dropping in vertexes basically for this guy. And I don't have to be specific about it. I can sort of drop them in wherever they take my fancy. As they take my fancy, just, yeah, that's looking good. And you can see they're following the contours. And now, if I want to start building that into polys, I just move along while holding down Shift. Now let me just show you what I've created here. And you can see I've created this geometry based around his shoulder. And I can quickly go through, and probably within an hour or so I could have this whole model retopologized using this tool. Finally, let's just jump back to our animated guy. I want to send this to Rob. So Rob can actually start working with this monster character and this monster animation. And really we're working in like a previz stage, or we're trying to work stuff out. Instead of me rendering all this out, I can actually just select this mesh and then just go File, Export Selected, and actually send this out as an FBX, which I've already done, and give that to Rob. And he can actually bring this in and start weaving his magic in Smoke. So with that, I'll leave you at that. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was informative for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks again. Bye.